And you'll have to turn your ear. Am I unmuted now? Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to read the sutta first of all. And as Sadhanandi says, I'm just going to take us through, not actually the whole of the first verse, but just through the opening lines. So the Karaniya Metta Sutta. She who is skilled in her good, who wishes to attain that state of calm, nibbana, should act thus. She should be able, upright, perfectly upright, of noble speech, gentle and humble, contented, easily supported, with few duties, of light livelihood, with senses calmed, discreet, not impudent, not greedily attached to families. She should not pursue the slightest thing for which other wise men and women might censure her. May all beings be happy and secure. May their hearts be wholesome. Whatever living beings there be, feeble or strong, tall, stout or medium, short, small or large, without exception, seen or unseen, those dwelling far or near, those who are born or those who are to be born, may all beings be happy. Let none deceive another, nor despise any person whatsoever in any place. Let them not wish any harm to another out of anger or ill will. Just as a mother would protect her only child at the risk of her own life, even so, let her cultivating a boundless heart towards all beings. Let her thoughts of boundless love pervade the whole world, above, below, and across, without any obstruction, without any hatred, without any enmity. Whether she stands, walks, sits, or lies down, as long as she is awake, she should develop this mindfulness. This, they say, is the noblest living here. Not falling into wrong views, being virtuous and endowed with insight, by discarding attachment to sense desire, never again is she reborn. So you could say that the Karaniya Metta Sutta describes the whole of the Buddhist path. It describes the motivation we need to practice, describes how to practice, and the results of that practice. It doesn't leave much out. And I have to say, each time that I read or hear the Karaniya Metta Sutta, I'm sort of taken a little bit by surprise. It's almost as though I forget that that the sutta is describing something very simple in a way. It's not complicated, as Sadhanandi said this morning. It's quite direct, it's quite straightforward, and it really does give us a sort of an outline of how we can practice to become free. I just wanted to say a little bit about where the teaching came from. So the Buddha gave the teaching of the sutta to a group of monks, and these monks had gone deep into the jungle to meditate. They wanted to sort of leave the shackles of even their sort of monastery life behind, and they wanted to face the real fears that would sort of occur to them in the jungle. So they settled down and they were practicing. But unfortunately, the local beings and the local gods and the local deities, they didn't like it. They didn't like what the monks were doing. And these deities and local gods became really unhappy. And they started doing things that to upset the monks, to disrupt the monks' practice. And they did as much as they could to distract them. They even began sort of like shouting in their ear and making loud noises and really sort of frightening them out of the states that they were trying to cultivate. So generally being totally disruptive. So after a while, the monks realized that they weren't coping with this very well, and quite a lot of irritation and distress was arising in them. So they went to see the Buddha and asked for his advice. And in response, the Buddha taught them the Karaniya Metta Sutta and the practice of the Metta Bhavana, and then really encouraged them to go back into the jungle to practice. So as you can imagine, the Buddha was encouraging them to do this. So the monks went back into the jungle, and they really were quite persistent in this development and cultivation of metta. And like all of us, we all respond to friendliness, we all respond to care, we all respond to a sense of being valued and loved. Well, so did these local deities and gods. And they responded by supporting the monks in their practice. So that's the sort of origins of the sutta. But I think the reason I wanted to say that is because I think it's quite important. I think it's important that the sutta was a response to a very real situation and a very real problem for people. And in it, we always have to remember that in it, we are hearing the words of the Buddha. So the Buddha just wasn't sort of sitting around one day and coming up with a good idea that he thought he would teach. It was a very real response to a real problem. And that is, I think, the light in which we need to hear the sutta. It's the Buddha's words in response to real problems. So I'm going to start off with the first few lines of the sutta. She who is skilled in the good, who wishes to attain that state of calm, nibbana, she should act thus. That's only one sentence, and that is the sort of sentence that I'm going to be talking about. And there's so much in this opening statement. I mean, one of the first things that I noticed, and one of the first things I was talking to Sadhananda about when we were talking about it the other day, is that this, like all of the Buddha's teachings, is an offering. It's an invitation. If you want to attain that state of calm, you should act thus. He's treating those who he's teaching us with respect, and immediately teaching something about reality and the nature of things. If you want this, you need to do that. But it's completely up to you. It's a real invitation. It's our choice, and it's our responsibility whether we take up this invitation. So for me, this is clearly an expression of metta, of the love mode rather than the power mode. So it's not a commandment. He's not telling us we have to obey him. He's just saying you're free to choose, and you're free to choose this practice or not. Completely up to you. So within that, if we say yes to the Buddha, we start by, if we say yes to this call, and we don't have to say yes, but if we do, then the Buddha starts by placing the purpose of practice right at the front of his description of metta. This is really interesting, isn't it? And as Sadhananda said this morning, the point of cultivating metta is to bring us closer to reality, closer to the realization of the true nature of things. And we do this by becoming skilled in our good. So this is talking about our ultimate goal, skilled in our good, skilled in our goal, in the light of this goal, and the goal being peace and the attainment of enlightenment, the attainment of nirvana, in the light of this, all other lesser goals are to be valued. So he puts it right out in front of us. And I think, again, this is a really interesting point. And of course, as I've said, the ultimate goal he is talking about is breaking out of our limited ways of being and seeing into the Lakshanas, seeing the impermanent as impermanent, and seeing the insubstantial as insubstantial. And he's teaching us the nature of things, including the nature of ourselves. So he's saying to us, you've got to break through the chains of clinging to ourselves as the center of the universe around which the rest of the world resolves. And we're breaking through into the boundless, open, true nature of things. In other words, we have insight into the nature of reality. The boundaries between self and other dissolve, and we become an alive and vital force for good in the world. This is the ultimate goal, the raison d'etre for practice. This is what the Buddha is telling us in this very opening line. And this, he says, is what we need to keep at the forefront of our minds when we practice. This, the Buddha says at the opening of the sutra, is what will keep us on the path of practice that leads to complete freedom. So I do find it interesting that the Buddha places it right at the beginning. For me, this says he knows us humans very well. He knows how easy it is for us to be inspired by the Dharma, to see its beauty, to have a glimmer or a taste of freedom. And then, what happens? The mundane creeps back in. Our habits creep back in, and we forget and fall back into our lesser goals. And practice become, when we do that, I mean, it's natural, to be honest. We are going to do that, and we're going to do it time and time again. And it's important that we don't get disheartened when we do it. But when we notice that we're doing it, it's really important that we once again refresh our motivation and bring the much bigger purpose of our practice back into the front of our minds. Because the problem is, of course, the problem is really, frankly, that Dharma practice works. We don't have to do much for our lives and our relationships to improve. And once they improve, we begin to settle back and we lose contact with the ultimate goal. And when we do that, Sadanandi again and we were talking the other evening, and we said, well, when you lose contact with that ultimate goal, it's a bit like we've shined the wheel enough, or another way of putting it is we fluffed up our cushions enough so that they look really nice. And we sort of shine it up a bit here, we make it a little bit more beautiful there, but we forget our ultimate goal. And that our ultimate goal is cleaning the room, opening out the space, and knocking down the walls. That's our goal. And we have to keep bringing that to our minds, reminding ourselves. And this is where Sangha is so important. And this is where spiritual friendship is so important. Because without the reminders of others, we can so easily just plateau out. And no matter how long we've been practicing, all of us are in danger of this. And sometimes, the longer we've been practicing, the more in danger we become, because we get quite adept at doing just enough to keep us steadily going on, but not enough to keep opening the doors, opening the room, clearing the space. So at every stage of the path, no matter where we are, we have to find a deeper motivation to practice. And it sort of makes sense, doesn't it? Because when we are applying ourselves, we will be continually outgrowing our motivation. You know, we'll leave that motivation behind and something more will be revealing itself. So we sort of have to stay awake to that. And the real danger, as I see it, in not staying awake to it is because eventually the cushions can go a bit flat the shine begins to wear off, and we can begin to doubt practice. We can become prey to doubt that practice doesn't work. And that is where we really need each other to remind us that we need to stay in touch with our bigger purpose, the bigger motivation, and taking the steps, which sometimes can be uncomfortable. So it's not that it's all an easy road or an easy path to, okay, that motivation's changed, I need to do something else, and then the next bit arises naturally. It can actually be a really uncomfortable process when we realise that what was motivating us doesn't anymore, and we've got to look more deeply. We've got to open something up more wisely, and that actually can sometimes bring fear. It can bring discontent. So we really do need both mindfulness and metta in this stage, where we allow our awareness to expand enough to give us confidence about taking the next steps. So, keeping our ultimate goal close to mind and refreshing it and renewing it is the antidote to, I think, the dangers of practice plateauing out and the dangers of us doubting what we're doing, doubting practice. Now, I'm not saying that doubt's wrong. I think doubt is a very natural part of practice, and sometimes we have to doubt, but there is an insidious doubt that occurs when we're practicing for lesser goals. And when those goals stop being met, there's a different sort of doubt. It's not a real doubt. It's more a worldly, insidious, nagging, samskaric doubt, if you see what I mean. So that can be a big ask. And so the Buddha makes a second point. His second point in this verse reminds us that if we want to reach the abode of peace, nirvana, we will need to move away from its opposite. We will need to move away from dukkha. So if that wasn't enough, then dukkha needs to come to mind. So to loosen the grip of dukkha, we first have to recognize it. We have to see it at play in our lives and ask questions about its causes. And we have to recognize it at different levels of our being. Quite often, the most basic level of recognition of dukkha that we need is to recognize it in our physical bodies, to recognize the vedana and the discomfort of dukkha. We need to recognize it in our minds when they're closed and cramped, and we need to recognize it in our hearts when our heart has closed down. This is all dukkha. And probably most of us know that dukkha is that state of dissatisfaction and frustration. And it's the frustration with the way things are. It's the state where we are closed to ourselves, driven by our own needs and desires, and we've lost our sense of connection with others. We've also lost our sense of connection with more expansive states. It's that sort of moment by moment experience we have of seeking pleasure and avoiding pain that Sadhanandi talked about this morning. And it's where out there becomes the threat, and we have to protect what is in here. This really is dukkha. It is where we're closed down to experience, and we're living in the world of stories. And it is the exact opposite of shanti, of peace. It's the exact opposite of the path to nirvana. So recognizing dukkha more and more in our experience is a key. Well, we know that dukkha is the foundation of faith. On the basis of dukkha, faith arises. On the basis of dukkha, a metaphor heart, if we bring the sutta to mind, will also arise. I was thinking about a couple of examples of this in my life this morning. They just popped into my head. And I remembered this moment quite a few years back, when I was living in Sydney, and we were in the search for a new centre, which meant, we had to go and look at a lot of properties, and 3 of us had taken on this search. And so we had the time when you had to be there, and we arrived, and I arrived, and Ratnajoti arrived, but the third person, who was also viewing the property with us, didn't arrive, and he was a little bit known for not keeping good time. And I was just, 3 or 4 minutes late at this meeting. I was just getting more and more irritated, and thinking, oh God, here he goes again. Here I am. I've done it well. I'm here. I'm doing all the right things, and me, he's wasting my time, and me was getting bigger and bigger. And I said in quite an irritable tone to Ratnajoti, where is this person who will remain nameless here? Where is this person? And he said, I wonder if he's okay. I wonder if anything's happened. I wonder if everything's all right with him. And it was just a moment of metta where I saw the mirror of self being so vividly held up in front of me. And it was just one of those moments when you catch dukkha, and you catch the stories and the mind making, and how that had moved me so far along from a metaphor consideration of somebody else. That really has stuck in my mind. And then I had a sort of opposite experience, probably around about the same time, actually. And it was just as I was coming up. So I was a centre manager at Sydney Buddhist Centre, and that often really meant nothing more than I worked there a lot, and I was on the front desk a lot, and mostly on my own. And it was just coming up to my time before I was leaving for my ordination. And in this phase of my life, my heart had opened, and there was a sort of a softness of being, and metta just seemed present and was there. And this guy came in the centre, and he was really quite this aggressive guy. He came in with all this aggressive energy and battling, and you could see he just wanted to bait me. Sorry, I've just had a message. Can I speak a bit slower? Sorry about this. So this guy came in, and he just wanted to get me into an argument. And you know how sometimes when people do that, they sort of they get up close to you. They like try and get into your space. And this guy was trying to get in my space. And you know what happened? He literally tried to come forward, and he bounced back. And I'm not exaggerating what happened. It's almost like I had this metta globe of protection, and he bounced off it. And my responses to him were just very open. And really, his whole physical being changed. And it was one of those obvious moments where metta was a protector for me, but it also had an effect on somebody else. And for me, that just shone out the sort of almost, and I feel a bit cringy saying it, but I'm going to say it anyway. It shone out as the sort of like the unknown magical quality of metta as a force for good. And that sort of mysterious quality that we do not understand the effect of some of what we're doing. Anyway, I just sort of thought I'd bring those out as much to remind me as to remind anybody else. But metta does work, and we often know when we're not coming from a metaphor approach. So that dukkha, when we are in this closed and narrowed down bubble of experience, we know that is the exact opposite to the path that's going to lead us to freedom. As Bhante says, when dukkha is permanently eradicated, when all conflict is over, what is left is peace. The part of the goal or the good that is most immediately relevant and appealing to us, in as much as we are in a chronic and habitual state of dissatisfaction or even suffering. So to move towards the goal, the Buddha says, we have to be skilled in the good. If we are to finally put an end to dukkha, we have to become skillful in what conduces its end. To become skillful requires both practice and understanding. We don't have to become a holy person, we just have to train ourselves. We have to practice metta to experience its effect, and we have to reflect on that experience to see that our conscious efforts have a result. They make a difference. If we are experiencing changes, we note these, and we note they did not happen by accident. They are not random. They're a consequence of the practices we apply ourselves to. So sometimes the negative bias that we all have means that we don't notice the positive effect of our choices. So to reach the state of peace, we have to have this practical capacity and intelligence, the practical capacity to go about daily life in a skillful way, and intelligence to notice the effect of our actions. So practicing and learning the skill of metta, it's like doing any other skill. It's like learning to drive, learning to ride a bike, learning to take care of ourselves. We develop a metta muscle, and by flexing it, we develop this muscle by flexing it. We do this not just on the cushion, but as we are moving around in our daily life. We develop this positive attitude for ourselves, to others, and to things. But we'll be talking more about that tomorrow. So, I've spoken for 2 minutes longer than I intended. But I've just had the nod from Sadhanandi that that's okay. Yeah.